Thank you for taking the time to watch this webinar. My name is Emma Mamo and I am Head of Workplace Wellbeing at Mind, the mental health charity. Mind provides information and support to empower anyone experiencing a mental health problem. We also campaign to improve services, promote understanding and raise awareness of mental health. Mind has just launched a major new project called the Blue Light Programme, which is dedicated to helping support the mental health of emergency services personnel across England. So that includes staff and volunteers working within the police service, the ambulance service, fire and rescue services, and then also search and rescue services. The programme is going to focus on raising awareness and tackling stigma within the services, providing training for line managers and team leaders so they can better support their staff, and then also building resilience among emergency service personnel so they can manage their mental health. And then we'll also be providing information and support to anyone who needs it. This webinar and others in the series have been made specifically for emergency service personnel. Joining me today to share her experience of living with a mental health problem while working for an emergency service is Helen Roberts, who is a call handler from Avon and Somerset Police. In this webinar, we'll be talking about what is mental wellbeing and what are some of the causes of poor mental health, what are some of the different mental health conditions and what does it look like to experience them, and then talking about how to support someone experiencing a mental health problem and perhaps who's in distress. And then some general sources of information and support for you as an emergency service personnel that you might need to access at certain times if you're struggling with your mental health. So in terms of what is mental health is often quite misunderstood. When someone is ill or in physical pain, we all understand what that means. They're ill, they need treatment, and once that's been received, there's a good chance of recovery. But thinking about a mental health problem, which is kind of invisible, you can't see it, so it's not that straightforward. So people can struggle to really understand what that means for someone, which in turn can sometimes make that situation worse. But the reality is we all have mental health, the same as we have physical health. It exists on a spectrum and we move up and down it from good to poor. And it can be affected by many things in life, both in and outside of work. So what does good mental health look like? Well, it can be different from person to person, but generally it's accepted that the signs of good mental health are that you feel relatively confident in yourself, you value and accept yourself, you don't judge yourself too harshly and not too critical of yourself. You feel and are able to express a range of emotions, and you feel engaged with the world around you. You're able to build and maintain positive relationships. And also the fact that you can live and work productively and then also cope with the kind of daily stresses of life and manage times of change and uncertainty. What I will say around mental health, there is still a lot of stigma. That idea of if you experience a mental health problem, it's a sign of a weakness. So this kind of stigma can exist in and out of work, at home, something that you experience with friends and family, and then just in general society. And people often tell us that living with the stigma is actually harder than sometimes living with the symptoms of the mental health problem. It's more about people's reactions to you. And this can really prevent people in distress or crisis getting the support they need because they don't feel comfortable speaking up. So as you can imagine, that can have quite a negative impact on people's lives and prevent them living the kind of life that they choose, having relationships, accessing education, being in work, and so on. But I will say it's important to remember that any one of us can experience a mental health problem at any time in our lives. And it's important that we're able to talk about our mental health and any problems we might be experiencing so we can get that support that we need at the time we need it. And it's often, a very natural response to life's challenges and stresses and unexpected life events. And in terms of prevalence, we know that 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem in any given year. So this is something that's important to all of us and affects everyone in our lives and ourselves as well. And we know that there are over 220,000 emergency services staff and volunteers working across England. So it's likely a quarter of you will experience poor mental health every year. And we also appreciate that this can be compounded by the challenging nature of your roles and your professions. And in fact, a recent survey that Mind conducted as part of the Blue Light programme, where we got responses from 3,500 staff and volunteers working within the emergency services, found that 87% of respondents said they had experienced stress and poor mental health whilst working in their role. But the research also found that people are less likely to take time off work sick, and this may be because of, again, stigma, or maybe a concern that, what impact would this have on my team or my colleagues and so on. So it means that working in this profession can have quite a significant impact on your mental health, and you can be quite vulnerable potentially to poor mental health. And our research also showed that there are quite a few pressures and challenges on the blue light services at the moment. When we asked people to identify what are the biggest triggers at the moment for poor mental health, what people listed was a lot of organisational changes, increased workload, pressure from management, but then also pressure on managers. They can often be the squeezed middle, and then changes to shift patterns, having long hours, and this can have a massive impact on your physical health. So not being able to eat, people on the beat, bobbies on the beat and so on, not being able to get a chance to eat and keep their energy levels up. And then also, dealing with distressing events, so taking calls from people who are, being a victim of a crime or in quite traumatic situations at that time, and then, supporting people through that. And then also financial worries, just, something we all experience. But then also the negative media coverage that a lot of the emergency services can often experience, in terms of, people having to wait a very long time to get support and so on. So all of this can quite significantly impact on your mental health. So in terms of mental health problems, well, they can affect the way we think, the way we feel and behave. Some of the more common mental health problems are often referred to as experiencing depression or anxiety. And I think because in common language and common discussion we often can talk about, I feel depressed today, I feel anxious. This can then think that people understand what it means to live with those conditions, but that can also mean that potentially you underestimate how severe an impact they can have if someone is struggling. Although we know mental health problems are very common, as I mentioned before, there's still a lot of stigma and discrimination and myths surrounding mental health. So a big part of the Blue Light programme is trying to raise awareness within the services about what this actually means and how you can best support someone. But I think a key thing to remember is it's possible to recover from a mental health problem. It's possible to live with a mental health problem and manage your condition. It's just about getting the support you need, and then you can live a fulfilling life and have a successful career and be capable, ambitious and skillful. So in terms of the causes of mental health problems, there's a wide range of factors that could contribute to someone experiencing a mental health problem. So this can include childhood experiences or life events like a bereavement or relationship problems, being a witness to traumatic events, and then also genetics can also play a role in some conditions, but they can also just happen. And I think knowing what potential triggers can be and the potential signs of a mental health problem is key to taking care of ourselves, and then also being able to look out for colleagues and also people, the general public and so on in the roles that you perform. So I think it's just about becoming more aware of when we might be at risk of experiencing a mental health problem, and then how to talk to someone and seek support or offer support depending, what the situation is. So in terms of talking a little bit about some of the more common mental health problems, these can include depression, anxiety and panic attacks, and then also post-traumatic stress disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder, also known as OCD. So we're going to talk about them briefly now, but you can find further information on Mind's website, and details will be given at the end of the webinar. And we also have quite a few films of people who are diagnosed with these conditions who talk about what it looks like for them, because mental health problems can affect people in different ways, even if it's the same mental health problem. So they're quite an interesting series of films to watch to kind of get more of an insight. So in terms of depression, as I was saying before, we can often say, I feel depressed, when we're feeling sad or miserable about life. And usually these feelings will pass, But if the feelings are interfering with your ability to live your day-to-day life and they don't go away, or they come back over and over again, it could be a sign that you are depressed. In its mildest form, depression can mean just feeling a bit low, and it doesn't really impact on your day-to-day life, but it can make things a little bit harder to do in terms of getting up, dealing with your bills and your post and so on. When it's more persistent, major depression can be quite life-threatening because it can make you lose energy and motivation. It can also affect you and cause you to have suicidal thoughts. So there are also some specific forms of depression, such as seasonal affective disorder. So this is a seasonal depression that relates to day length. So often people talk about experience this in autumn or winter during the shorter days and when there's limited sunlight. And then also postnatal depression. So the baby blues is often experienced by mothers soon after childbirth, but it can pass after a day or two. But postnatal depression is much more serious and can occur between 2 weeks and 2 years after childbirth, and someone will need support to help manage that. And then another quite common form of a mental health problem is experiencing anxiety. So this is something we all experience from time to time. These feelings of feeling tense or uncertain or fearful at the thought of an exam, or if you've got a health problem, or you're going into hospital, or going for a job interview, or starting a new role. So you may feel worried about how successful you're going to be or what the outcome's going to be, and these worries can affect your sleep, your appetite. You might want to eat less. And also your ability to concentrate. But if everything goes well, this feeling of anxiety tends to go away. So this type of short-term anxiety may actually be useful at times. Feeling nervous or feeling pressure can make you more alert and enhance your performance. However, if these feelings of anxiety overwhelm you, or they're quite long-term, your ability to concentrate and then do well may suffer as a result. So thinking about, the fight or flight reflex. So anxiety and fear can protect you from danger. So when you feel under threat, anxiety and fear trigger the release of adrenaline in your body. And this causes your heart to beat faster, carrying blood to, the parts of your body where it's needed most. And you can breathe faster to provide the extra oxygen you require. And you sweat to prevent overheating. Your mouth may feel dry, as your digestive system slows down to allow more blood to be sent to your muscles, and then your senses become heightened and your brain becomes more alert. So these changes make your body able to take action and protect you in a dangerous situation, either by running away or fighting. So as I said, this is what is commonly known as the fight or flight reflex. And once the danger is past, other hormones are released that may cause you to shake as your muscles start to relax. So as I said, this is quite useful if protecting you from a dangerous situation like an attack, but it's not so useful if you are experiencing these feelings in response to kind of everyday situations like crossing the road or driving a car or dealing with aspects of your job. So, and this is mainly because if there is no physical threat and you don't have to physically run away or fight, the effects of the adrenaline subside much more slowly, and you may go on feeling agitated for longer periods, which then has an impact on your mental health. So when anxiety stays at a high level for a long time, you may feel that it is difficult to deal with your everyday life. The anxiety may become more severe, you may feel powerless and out of control. And sometimes if you are feeling this quite heightened sense of fear, you may experience a panic attack. So this is an exaggeration of the body's normal response to fear, stress or excitement. It's the rapid build-up of overwhelming sensations such as a pounding heartbeat, feeling faint or sweating or experiencing nausea or chest pains or problems with your breathing. And as I said, feelings of losing control and then shaky limbs and, when your legs turn to jelly. So when you experience a panic attack, you may fear that you are blacking out or having a heart attack, and you may be convinced that you are going to potentially die in the course of the attack, making this quite a terrifying experience for people. And they can come on quite quickly, with symptoms usually peaking within 10 minutes. And most panic attacks will last between 5 and 20 minutes. However, some people have actually said that they can experience attacks for up to an hour, but they're likely to be experiencing one attack after another, or a high level of anxiety following that initial attack. For some people, they might only experience 1 or 2 attacks and then never experience it again. Or some other people might experience attacks once a week or once a month or several times, and it can become quite a common occurrence. And for some people, they can seem to come without warning and strike at random, which can have a massive impact. And a lot of people have said to me that, you know, you're then quite fearful of experiencing one, which can in turn just make one happen then, just the fear of thinking it might happen. So it can be quite a challenging thing to deal with. We're now going to hear from Helen, who I introduced earlier, who works as a call handler within Avon and Somerset Police, about her experiences.
Yeah, I work with Avon and Somerset Police. I'm a call handler. I've worked there for almost 9 years this year. We take non-emergency calls and 999 calls.
Okay.
Initially when I started, we only took non-emergency calls, but about 3 years ago we were trained to take 999 calls, and also in about the last couple of months we were trained to take crime reports and input them on the system as well. So it's a very varied role now.
And quite busy.
And very busy, yeah. At the moment it's very, very busy. So, but I've suffered from chronic depression and anxiety for over 20 years. In my 9 years working with the emergency services, I've had several periods of depression and anxiety, but not as a direct result of my role itself.
Okay.
I actually believe that my illness helps me in my role. It gives me a purpose, knowing I'm helping other people.
Okay.
It helps me to feel good about myself.
Okay.
If I've had a call and I know I've helped them, it gives you a little personal boost, so it does make you feel better. We also receive a lot of calls from people who suffer from mental ill health, and I feel, because I've got experience of it myself, I show a lot more empathy towards them, and understanding as well, because I can understand things that they're saying, experiences that they're talking about. I can relate to it quite a lot, even though I sometimes can't tell them that on the call.
But it just helps you handle it.
It helps me handle it because I know the response to give them, to make them feel better as well, and to deal with the call properly. In relation to the role itself, I wouldn't say that anything actually triggers my illness.
Okay.
Or probably not yet, that's probably what I'd say. I haven't had anything that's triggered my illness as a direct result of my job. Sometimes if you have a difficult call or caller, it can possibly play on your mind a little bit more, probably longer than somebody who's not suffering from a mental health illness, if that makes sense.
And do you have opportunities at work to kind of debrief after a call that you found challenging, so you can kind of process it?
Yeah, if your supervisors will know if you're taking a particularly traumatic or bad call, and once that call finishes, they give you the opportunity to go and take 5, have a cup of tea, calm down, get your thoughts back together.
And do you ever talk about, you know, how you handled the call, the course of action you take, or how you spoke to them, to then say, you know, did I do that correctly? How do I feel about that?
You can do, yeah.
I feel like that's quite useful to have people kind of process and then kind of not put it to bed, but kind of think, right, well, I did that, I'll learn that for next time.
If you know, could I have done anything else?
Yeah.
Did I say the right thing? Yeah, definitely.
That's good.
Yeah, you certainly get that opportunity. But also if it's extremely busy, that can affect my concentration, because you want to answer the calls, you want to deal with them, but you know there are calls waiting, and those calls could possibly be life-threatening calls, and you need to get them. So it does give you a sense of panic in a certain aspect.
Pressure.
Yeah, the pressure side of
responsibility.
But I've learned to manage that. I've learned to manage my panic attacks through controlled breathing. That's something that I learned over the last couple of years, and it's really, really helped me. If I can feel a panic attack starting to come on, like you mentioned before about the fast breathing, the chest pain, you know when it's coming on. I just take a moment, slow my breathing right down, take real deep breaths, and And so far it has worked. I haven't had a serious panic attack for quite a while now, because I can feel when it's coming on, know what to do, take control of the breathing.
And if you felt that one had gone past that point, do you think colleagues would be able to, are any of your colleagues aware that you might experience that and how to support you if you were?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult, because if it does start to take over, you're sat in a room full of people, but you don't feel you can say anything.
Right.
Like you say, it's the fight or flight experience. You either sit there and panic, or you run out the door. You don't quite know what to do. But I've only had one serious panic attack at work, several years ago, and after sitting there for a while, I thought, I'm going to have to say something, because I thought I was going to die. So approached my supervisor, and they took me into a quiet room, again helped me control my breathing.
Try and de-escalate.
Yeah, and then said, we went for a walk around the complex, and to get me back into control of myself. And he said, if you need to leave, leave, or you can come back into work, it's up to you. And I did. I carried on staying at work after controlling myself.
Okay.
So yeah, it was
really good then.
Yeah, it was a positive experience. That, like I said, that was several years ago, and it stayed with me.
Right.
Because it was a positive experience. So
that helps you manage it then.
Yeah. Knowing that I can go and speak to somebody again from there. So yeah, but everybody's supportive at work. My colleagues, my managers. Especially the more I speak about it now, the more people are aware of it, the more supportive I find that they've become.
Okay.
My manager especially will always make a point of asking how I am, if there's anything that they can do. They even text me at home if they know I'm off or anything,
just to check in.
Just to check and make sure I'm okay. They even know if I'm not quite myself, because I'm quite a bubbly, happy person normally, and if I go into work sometimes and I'm not like that, they can tell, and they won't make a big deal of it. They'll just say, are you okay? Do you need a chat for 10 minutes? Or
that's really useful, isn't it? So they feel comfortable to raise it, because sometimes you worry about boundaries, but I suppose because you've been open, I think, oh, I'm just checking in, is everything okay?
And they know, rather than me sitting there thinking, I wish somebody would ask me, or be able to, to be able to feel that you can go and say to them, this is how I'm feeling, or is a big thing. So knowing that support is in place is really a great help. Yeah, definitely.
Can I just ask, do you feel, because you've been open, have any other colleagues come up to you and said, oh, actually I experienced this, or I've got a family member who has this, or something similar? Do you find that around mental health, once one person speaks up, other people then kind of feel comfortable to be open to?
I've had several colleagues, when I've done certain things and talked about my experiences, they've approached me and said, I've had this, I've experienced this, my daughter's experienced this, and we'll have a really good chat. But it's difficult because I try and encourage them to get help.
So you've got to be aware of the boundaries then as well for you.
So it's, but again, it's just having that person to sit and listen to somebody and understand what they're going through, and be able to be a listening ear.
Just show empathy. And just,
definitely. But I think the more, I find anyway, the more that you talk about it, the easier it becomes. I'll talk to anybody about my experiences, and I'll listen to theirs without any hesitation.
I suppose the difficulty in work is once you say it, you can't unsay it. So people can be quite fearful. So then it's to think through, what do I need to share at this point, and who needs to know what. Yeah,
definitely. But it is definitely worth talking about it, because it certainly helps. Even just saying to somebody, I'm not quite right today, I don't feel quite myself today, or I'm feeling a bit low today.
Rather than trying to hide that.
Yeah, just even saying those words makes you feel better. But it's being able to say those words and being comfortable enough to say those words, and having the other person understand what you mean.
Yeah, rather than go, ooh. Yeah. I think people with mental health, it's similar to bereavement. You don't want to say the wrong thing, so you say nothing, which is the worst thing. And actually just saying anything and saying, oh, I'm not sure if I'm helping or not, but is there anything I can do?
Yeah.
But you just have to feel comfortable to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the thing. It's not that, that
people don't care.
we'll talk about stigma later, but it's not that people don't care and they don't, it's just that they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
They either they're fearful that they might say something to upset you, or they literally just
think you might not want to talk about it.
Yeah, they
but
don't
just
know
say,
what
oh,
to say.
if
Or
you
they'll
want to talk
change the
about
subject.
Yeah.
That's the best one, when you say, oh, I'm feeling really low today, and they go, so what did you do at the weekend? And you're like, completely changing the subject. But yeah, it's...
Anything else to add?
My counsellor at work, I've had support through occupational health as well. We talked about my managers and colleagues, but the occupational health department, I've seen them over the last 9 years several times, and they have been absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant.
The best support I've ever had. I'm still in touch with my counsellor now, even though I haven't seen her for several years, but she was like my rock. I could email her, phone her at any time, and she knew me inside out. She could tell anything.
Okay.
So.
And did she also advise like your manager or your team leader about how to support you, or was it just kind of support to you?
No, she did. She contacted them several times and made recommendations and suggestions.
About
and
adjustments and support measures in the workplace.
Right, yeah.
That's good.
And sometimes as well, she, with my permission, she explained to them something that I couldn't explain.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel at that point comfortable enough to say it directly. So she put it in words that, from a third person as such, so, that they would understand.
That's useful.
But now I feel comfortable enough to say it face to face. So
that's positive.
It's a big positive. Yeah, they've helped me a great deal.
That's good. Anything else you wanted to add around your experiences at this point, or cover it all?
I think it's just to say really that it's, as I've mentioned several times, it's best to talk about it. That's what's helped me over the last couple of years, is to talk about it a lot more. But also anybody who knows somebody who suffers, or if you suffer yourself, we're not asking for people to cure us. We're not asking for you to be medical scientists and things like that. Just listen. Just listen to what we've got to say. Not even necessarily understand it, because 9 times out of 10, I don't even understand what's going on in my mind. But it's just knowing that you can speak to somebody and share your experience with them, because the more people share, the more other people will understand.
No, absolutely. So. And I knew of someone who was living with anxiety, and in the morning they would feel a bit anxious if their supervisor didn't say good morning. They think, have I done something wrong? So when she was able to kind of share that with her supervisor, and he just said, oh, I'll always make a point then of saying good morning. So it's those kind of tiny adjustments that you just need to be able to say, but they don't cost a lot or anything, really.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's not that you're looking for any special treatment. You don't need to be mollycoddled, as some people have said to me before. They don't want to mollycoddle me or highlight the issue. But it's not even about that. It's just knowing that
what might cause an issue or might cause a slight trigger for anxiety.
Because like you said, everybody's experiences are different. Some people, I'll give you an example. I tend to like to converse via email rather than getting up and going and speaking to somebody, which might sound strange within somebody in the same room, but that's just how I cope with it. And it took a while for my supervisors to realise that that was the case.
Your preferred
and now they're fine. Everything, we converse via email and different things. Obviously, if I'm having a good day, I'll go up and speak to them. I've got no problem with that, and they like that, and they know then I'm having a good day. But
that's just how you manage.
That's how I manage something. Yeah,
feeling the anxiety. Okay, thank you. That was really useful for you to share. And thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think that's a huge part of what we want to do with the Blue Light programme, is educate more people working within the services about what mental health can look like, but also just how to just respond to someone and broach the conversation if they feel it's needed. So that was really useful for Helen to kind of share your experience of living with depression and anxiety. We're now going to talk about some other mental health conditions. So post-traumatic stress disorder, for anyone involved in or witnessing a traumatic event, it is common to experience upsetting or confusing feelings afterwards, and those feelings of distress may not appear immediately afterwards. And in fact, you might be, in shock or emotionally numb to it, but after a time, you might develop emotional and physical reactions to the experience. This is understandable, and often people find that those symptoms disappear after a short time. But for some people, the symptoms may last longer or be more extreme, and this could then lead to a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. There's no time limit on this, and some people may develop symptoms many years after an event. I've heard of a lot of people coming out of military backgrounds and not experiencing a problem for 5 to 7 years, and that's when they've kind of transitioned and doing other roles. So it's about thinking about how best to support people. And also, not everyone who has experienced a traumatic event will actually develop PTSD. So the symptoms, as again we've spoken about other mental health problems, they can really vary from person to person, but they can include, vivid flashbacks of the event, intrusive thoughts and images. They might experience nightmares while they sleep, intense distress at any reminders of the event, and then experiencing pain or sweating, nausea or trembling. And then also experiencing this feeling of being on edge, so being easily upset or angry or startled, extreme alertness, hypersensitivity around, what's happening and so on, experiencing disturbed sleep, lack of concentration, and then also maybe self-destructive behaviour or recklessness as a result of what they're feeling. And it can also mean that people want to avoid feelings or memories by keeping busy, trying to keep the thoughts away, avoiding situations that remind them of the event, then repressing any memories, and then feeling detached or cut off and emotionally numb. And then being able to express affection can also be a problem, and then potentially using alcohol or drugs to kind of cope and avoid the memories. And some people may also develop other mental health problems linked to the PTSD, so severe anxiety, phobia, or experiencing depression or a dissociative disorder where you withdraw, and then experiencing suicidal feelings potentially. So anyone can experience a traumatic event, but you may be more likely to have experienced one if you work in a high-risk occupation, such as within the emergency services. If you're a refugee or an asylum seeker who's been coming from war or conflict and has witnessed that, or if you've potentially suffered, traumatic events in your childhood, like childhood abuse and so on. Another common mental health problem is obsessive compulsive disorder, or also known as OCD. So this is described as having an anxiety disorder which has two main parts, so obsessions and then compulsions. So the obsessions are unwelcome thoughts or images or urges or doubts that repeatedly appear in your mind. For example, feeling that you've been contaminated by dirt or germs. And then, these can be quite frightening and seem quite horrible to deal with, and that you can't share them with other people. And the obsessive thoughts kind of interrupt your other thoughts and make you feel quite anxious. A limited number of obsessions are a normal part of brain activity in human beings, and everyone will have flashes of something like this, but you can quite quickly dismiss or forget them. But in people who live with OCD, these obsessions become more frequent and are difficult to dismiss and kind of intrude on their life. And then the second part of it are the compulsions. So these are repetitive activities that you feel you have to do. So repeatedly checking a door to make sure it's locked, repeatedly checking if you turn off the oven or something like that, or repeating a specific phrase in your head to prevent harm coming to a loved one. And the aim of the compulsion is to try and deal with the distress caused by the obsessive thoughts and relieve the anxiety you're feeling. However, the process of repeating these compulsions is often distressing, and any relief you feel can be short-lived, and also they can massively impact on your ability to just live your day-to-day life. In terms of talking about some of the more severe mental health problems, these can have quite a significant impact on a person's life and on those around them. And when these types of mental health problems are diagnosed, there is a range of specialist support and medication that people can receive. However, if a problem goes undiagnosed or the support is inconsistent, then the situation can deteriorate quite quickly. So some examples of these more severe mental health problems include psychosis. So this is when you perceive or interpret events differently from those around you. So these might include experiencing hallucinations or delusions. So an hallucination is when someone is seeing things that others can't, or experiencing sensations that have no apparent cause. Some people can also experience hearing voices that others don't hear. And sometimes these can be positive and helpful, but they can also be hostile voices. In terms of delusions, this is an extreme belief that other people do not share. So some can be extremely frightening and make you feel threatened. For example, you may feel that something or someone is trying to control your mind or harm you, and these are often referred to as paranoid delusions. And then there's also a condition called bipolar disorder. So this is where people experience quite major mood swings. So this will involve, periods of depression, which then alternate with periods of sort of mania or hyper. When they're experiencing this, they're in quite a high state of excitement and may plan or try to carry out overly ambitious schemes or ideas. And then there are some other conditions grouped under personality disorders. So the word personality refers to our patterns of thoughts, feelings and behaviours that make us individuals. We don't always think, feel and behave in the same way, but mostly we do tend to have predictable patterns. And our personalities don't change too much, but they do grow, and we usually learn from previous experiences and cope with life more effectively as we mature. However, if you have a personality disorder, you are more likely to find this difficult. Your patterns of thinking are more difficult to change, and you'll have a more limited range potentially of emotions and behaviours to help you cope with everyday life. And your beliefs and attitudes can also be very different from most other people, and they may then find that unusual or difficult to handle, and this can lead to feelings of insecurity and then ultimately isolation. So we've just been talking there about some of the more familiar, more well-known kind of conditions, but I just want to talk a moment about treatment and support. So there is a wide range of treatment and support available to assist people experiencing mental health problems. And seeking help is a really important step towards feeling better, managing your condition and then staying well. And it's common to feel unsure about seeking support for your mental health, and we can often delay taking action. But it's always, okay to seek help even when you're not sure about what's going on. So you might choose to seek help because you're finding it difficult to cope with day-to-day life. Your thoughts or feelings are having an impact on you, and you may want to find out what help you can get. So a good place to start is to talk to your GP. They may be able to make a diagnosis and offer you support and treatments, and then potentially refer you to a specialist service if that's appropriate. If you decide you want to talk to someone, I think it's really important to remember to be honest and open. Focus on how you feel rather than focusing on a potential diagnosis. Try to explain how you've been feeling and anything that has changed recently. And then use words and descriptions that feel natural to you. And everyone deserves help, and your doctor is there to support you, whether you think your problem is small or large. And I think, try and prepare. So, maybe make some notes to help you remember what you really want to say or what you want to really ask about. Have a kind of script or bullet points. That often helps me. And there may also be some support available through your work. So Helen, you were talking about occupational health and how supported they've been. I know a number of the emergency services also provide employee assistance programs. So those are confidential helplines that you can call up about your health, your mental health, but also a whole range of life issues that might be having an impact on you. They can often give legal advice and so on. So maybe looking into seeing if any of that's available. And then also peer support, looking to your colleagues who might have tips and guidance, who, understand, the role that you do, the context, the operating environment you're working in, and then how that you can maybe manage what's happening to you. So we would always encourage anyone in need of help to not give up and to not feel discouraged. And as we said, talk to the people around you about how you're feeling and what you're experiencing. There are a lot of people available who are very willing to support you through a difficult time, and you can always contact Mind for further information about what support is available, and details will be available at the end of this webinar. In this next section, we're going to talk about how to support someone who is living with a mental health problem or someone who's experiencing some distress. And I will say that communication is really important. You need to make sure you communicate effectively so they feel supported, so they feel reassured. You know, if your communication is inappropriate in any way, you know, this could exacerbate the situation and their symptoms. So you were talking earlier about how you feel because of your personal experiences. Yeah. You can better communicate with someone who might be feeling quite a lot of distress. So when communicating with someone, you can sense maybe that they are in distress. I think it's important to kind of put the person at ease, you know, be patient and calm and supportive, and let them speak at the pace that feels right for them. Don't rush people, that can exacerbate, you know, feelings of distress. And then also I think it's important to acknowledge and respect their feelings and listen sensitively and actively. And if you're face to face, you know, try using responsive body language to, again, reassure them. If you are just talking to them potentially over the phone or so on, taking a call, you know, using a calm and reassuring tone, asking short, simple and open questions. And then it's potentially helpful to reflect back any information or to summarise any issues to show that you have been actively listening. And then in terms of in a workplace context, you know, addressing any concerns that you have about someone's behaviour or conduct is part of a manager or supervisor's responsibility. But I think it's important to note that some of these behavioural changes and so on may be a result of a mental health problem or their response to a distressing incident. So it's good to kind of approach this not from a kind of disciplinary kind of approach, but more thinking, could there be something going on that's having an impact on someone's mental health? And it's quite important to explore that before talking about, you know, any impact or consequences and so on. So thinking more specifically about how to support someone in distress, there are a few basic rules that will help. So present options to the person, not commands. People, when they're in distress, can often feel out of control, so just trying to give them as much control back is quite helpful. Yeah. Would you agree?
Definitely.
Definitely. Yeah. Good. Avoid focusing on negative options or negative language, so keeping it quite positive. And then acknowledging a person's anger, even if the anger is directed at you or your actions, I think it's best to, you know, not take that personal, but acknowledge, I understand that you feel quite angry. Yeah. How can we kind of, you know, address this and so on. And then asking whether the person usually gets support from anyone and whether you can get in touch with them or on their behalf, whether that would be helpful. And then referring them to other services that could help them. And then we were talking about this a moment ago around tone and language. You know, how you speak to someone in distress may have a real big impact on how they're feeling. So you should consider how the other person will interpret the way you interact with them. So using a reassuring tone and displaying responsive body language, like retaining eye contact with them, nodding and using utterances to kind of show understanding and empathy. And then listening sensitively, you know, allow the person to talk freely and don't interrupt, don't try and rush someone. If they're crying, let them express their feelings and so on. And then, as I said, you know, acknowledge how they're feeling, but use statements that are neutral or supportive. And then also think about how you can validate and assure them. So you can tell them that many people also have experienced a similar experience and so on. And then I think it's really important to try and avoid statements that may appear to belittle someone's feeling, like, you know, you'll feel better tomorrow, don't worry about it. You know, if someone is in quite a high state of distress, you know, you need to kind of acknowledge that and show respect to that. Now, you might then perceive someone's behaviour slightly challenging if they become angry or potentially abusive. So I think, as we were talking a moment ago, I think it's important to acknowledge the anger rather than trying to defend yourself, even if the anger is directed at you. If someone becomes offensive or abusive, then politely but assertively interrupt them to state that you find the language or tone unacceptable and request that they moderate their tone or language. And then ensure that you give them a chance to stop being abusive or offensive so that the communication can continue. Or you could potentially offer them to say, you know, do you want to call back or do you want to speak at a different point when you're feeling less emotional? Could be an option to explore. And then in terms of maybe interacting or speaking with someone who is experiencing hallucinations and delusions, remember that these events are real for them and can be very frightening for that person. So it's important not to dismiss or minimise or argue with the person about what they're experiencing, because it's real for them. Communicate that you understand and accept that they are experiencing these events, but do not pretend that you're experiencing them too. That would be unhelpful. Where possible, show that you empathise and understand some of their feelings, for example, if they are experiencing anxiety. And then try and communicate in an uncomplicated and succinct manner, repeating things if necessary. And then after you communicate something, allow plenty of time for the person to process the information and respond. So then in terms of support and resources available, as I was saying before, there's quite a lot available for someone wanting to talk to someone about their mental well-being or any other concerns that they may have, whether it's about work, relationships, health, money or other issues. Speaking to someone in your workplace will be most beneficial if they are aware of mental health and its interaction with work and how best you can maybe put in place adjustments or support measures. So as I was saying before, it's great that Helen's had really positive experiences, and that's what we want to ensure through the Blue Light programme, so that anyone who might be experiencing a problem will get the right kind of support when they need it, and they're working within an open and supportive and positive workplace in relation to mental health. And as we were saying, outside of work, there are many sources of support available, which you may find helpful, like going to your GP or calling Mind's Blue Light info line. Again, details of this will be at the end of this webinar. We hope that you've found viewing this webinar helpful. We've produced additional webinars in this series called Looking After Your Mental Health, so that offers top tips about how you can look after your mental health in greater detail, and then also managing mental health in the workplace, so talking about what support should be available within your workplace, both of which are available to view now. Please also take a few moments to give us your feedback by completing the short survey that immediately follows this webinar. It's really important for us to get your feedback, and it will help us to ensure the programme meets your needs. We've also produced other resources specifically for emergency services personnel that cover these topics in greater detail. So these are available to you and your colleagues, so please share these as they may be of help to someone. And at the end of this webinar, all the signposting information to all these resources and support services is available, including Mind's dedicated Blue Light info line. So we're determined to reach as many emergency personnel as we possibly can, so please do make your colleagues aware of the Blue Light programme, the advice and support and services that we have available to everyone, and then obviously these webinars. Thank you for watching.